They crossed oceans without maps. They climbed mountain ranges without roads. They entered frozen landscapes with no idea what lay beyond the horizon. Tens of thousands of years before the wheel, the compass, or even written language, ancient humans managed to spread across nearly every corner of Earth. The mystery isn't that they traveled. It's how they survived journeys that would challenge many people even today. For generations, scientists imagined early humans as slow wanderers who drifted across continents almost by accident. Modern archaeology tells a very different story. The evidence now reveals skilled explorers who adapted to deserts, coastlines, forests, glaciers, and open seas with astonishing ingenuity. The first great journey began in Africa. Around 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens emerged in Africa, where every human being alive today ultimately traces their ancestry. For tens of thousands of years, our species spread across different African environments, learning to survive in grasslands, dense forests, river valleys, and arid regions. This wasn't aimless movement. It was constant adaptation. Families followed seasonal rains, migrating herds, and reliable water sources. Rivers acted like natural highways, guiding people through unfamiliar territory while providing fish, fresh water, and edible plants along the way. Every successful journey added knowledge that could be passed to the next generation. Unlike modern travelers, they carried no written maps. Their geography existed entirely in memory. Hills became landmarks. Distinctive rock formations marked safe routes. Certain trees signaled hidden springs nearby. Over time, these mental maps grew into vast networks of environmental knowledge shared through storytelling and experience. Long before civilization, humanity had already become remarkably good at reading the landscape itself. Then came one of the most important migrations in human history. Between roughly 70,000 and 60,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens began leaving Africa in larger numbers. The exact routes remain debated, but archaeological and genetic evidence points toward movement through the Sinai Peninsula and possibly across the southern end of the Red Sea during periods when sea levels were much lower than they are today. This wasn't a single expedition led by one heroic group. It unfolded over thousands of years. Small bands gradually expanded into neighboring regions, settled for generations, and then continued onward as climates shifted and resources changed. You might imagine these people constantly searching for adventure. More likely, they were simply following food, fresh water, and familiar animal migrations. Every generation pushed only a little farther than the last, yet those small steps accumulated into one of the greatest expansions any species has ever achieved. Without realizing it, these travelers were beginning a journey that would eventually place humans on nearly every continent except Antarctica. Here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. By at least 65,000 years ago, humans had reached Australia. At the time, lower sea levels connected many islands into larger landmasses, but one enormous obstacle still remained. Even during the Ice Age, deep channels separated Southeast Asia from the continent known as Sahul, the combined landmass of Australia and New Guinea. In other words, ancient humans had to cross open water. No one knows exactly what their boats looked like because wood rarely survives for tens of thousands of years. Yet, the archaeological evidence leaves little room for doubt. People reached Australia, meaning they intentionally crossed stretches of ocean that may have extended dozens of kilometers beyond the visible shoreline. Think about what that required. They needed some form of watercraft, the ability to organize groups, and enough confidence to paddle toward land they often could not even see. This was not luck. It was planning. That single achievement rewrites the stereotype of prehistoric people as primitive wanderers. They were already capable of solving problems that demanded cooperation, foresight, and extraordinary courage. And the next migration would prove even more incredible, because this time the challenge wasn't endless water. It was a world locked beneath ice. Imagine walking into a landscape where winter seemed endless. During the last ice age, massive glaciers covered huge portions of North America and Northern Europe. Temperatures were far colder than today, yet humans didn't simply avoid these frozen regions. They adapted to them with remarkable success. By around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had spread across much of Europe, where they encountered harsh winters unlike anything their ancestors had experienced in Africa. Archaeological discoveries reveal tailored clothing made from animal hides, carefully constructed shelters, sophisticated stone tools, and controlled use of fire. Bone needles found at later Ice Age sites suggest that sewing fitted garments had become an essential survival skill. This wasn't just endurance, it was innovation. Every new environment demanded new solutions, and humans consistently found them. The farther they traveled, the more adaptable they became. One question has fascinated archaeologists for decades. How did humans first reach the Americas? For much of the 20th century, the leading explanation centered on the Bering Land Bridge, a vast stretch of land known as Beringia that connected Siberia and Alaska during periods of low sea level. Rather than a narrow crossing, Beringia was a broad landscape of grasslands where mammoths, bison, horses, and other Ice Age animals roamed freely. Human groups gradually followed these animals eastward. They weren't crossing into a mysterious new continent. They were simply pursuing familiar food sources across connected land. Recent archaeological discoveries have complicated the story. Evidence from several sites suggests that people may have entered the Americas earlier than once believed, possibly traveling along the Pacific coastline using boats and exploiting rich marine resources. If that's correct, ancient humans combined coastal navigation with overland travel long before recorded history. The debate continues, but one conclusion is becoming increasingly difficult to challenge. Early humans were far more versatile travelers than earlier generations of researchers imagined. Not every journey depended on speed. Some migrations unfolded so slowly that no individual would have realized they were participating in one of history's greatest expansions. A family might relocate only a few kilometers during its lifetime. Their children would settle slightly farther away. Their grandchildren would continue the pattern. Repeat that process for hundreds of generations, and humanity spreads across entire continents. This gradual movement explains why ancient migration often leaves such subtle archaeological traces. There were no grand departures or dramatic farewell ceremonies. Daily life simply carried people toward new rivers, unfamiliar valleys, and distant coastlines as climates shifted and populations grew. Yet slow movement did not mean random movement. These communities possessed an intimate understanding of seasonal cycles, animal behavior, edible plants, and changing weather. They knew when rivers flooded, where herds gathered, and which mountain passes remained accessible throughout the year. That knowledge became humanity's greatest vehicle. Before horses were domesticated, before wagons rolled across roads, before sails caught the wind, information itself was the technology that carried people farther than any other species had ever traveled. And we're still not at the most astonishing chapter because the final stage of this story reveals how ancient humans managed to settle nearly every habitable environment on Earth long before the first cities ever appeared. By the end of the last ice age, humans had accomplished something no other large mammal had ever achieved. They had successfully adapted to scorching deserts, dense tropical forests, towering mountain ranges, windswept grasslands, frozen tundra, and thousands of kilometers of coastline. Each new environment demanded different skills. Desert travelers memorized hidden water sources and timed their journeys around seasonal rains. Forest communities learned to navigate beneath dense canopies where distant landmarks disappeared from view. Along coastlines, people harvested shellfish, caught fish, and gradually developed increasingly capable watercraft that expanded the distance they could safely travel. No single invention made this possible. Success came from countless small innovations passed from one generation to the next. Better stone tools, warmer clothing, stronger shelters, improved hunting techniques. The real advantage wasn't superior strength. It was the ability to learn, remember, and teach. That collective knowledge became humanity's greatest survival strategy. Ancient travel wasn't driven by a single reason. Climate shifts often forced people to leave familiar territories as lakes dried up, forests expanded, or glaciers blocked traditional routes. At other times, growing populations encouraged younger groups to establish new settlements beyond the lands occupied by their relatives. Food remained the most consistent motivation, but curiosity almost certainly played a role as well. You can picture a hunting party spotting smoke rising beyond a distant ridge or noticing migrating animals moving toward an unfamiliar valley. Following them might reveal richer hunting grounds, new freshwater springs, or entirely different landscapes. Every successful expedition expanded the community's understanding of the world. Even encounters with other human species shaped these journeys. As Homo sapiens spread across Eurasia, they met Neanderthals and, farther east, the mysterious Denisovans. Genetic evidence shows these groups didn't simply pass each other by. They occasionally interbred, leaving traces of their DNA in many people alive today. Ancient travel didn't just change geography, it changed humanity itself. So how did ancient humans travel the world? The answer is both simpler and more extraordinary than most people expect. They didn't conquer the planet through speed or advanced technology. They succeeded through patience measured in thousands of years, extraordinary adaptability, careful observation, and knowledge shared across generations. Rivers became highways. Coastlines became navigation routes. Ice bridges connected continents. Simple boats carried families across open water. Every step relied on experience accumulated long before anyone could write it down. When you look at a modern world map, it's easy to imagine that continents were always connected by ships, highways, and airplanes. In reality, every inhabited region represents countless forgotten journeys made on foot or by primitive watercraft, often into places no human had ever seen before. Most of those travelers never knew they were making history. They were simply trying to find food, safety, and a better future for their families. That may be the most remarkable part of all. Every city, every nation, and every civilization that exists today can trace its origins back to small groups of people willing to walk beyond the next horizon, trusting nothing more than their instincts, their memory, and each other. The world wasn't discovered in a single age of exploration. It was explored one careful step at a time, beginning tens of thousands of years before history ever learned how to write itself.